the east side of the county suffered a large political and spiritual loss last summer when Stephanie Tubbs Jones passed away. What was the impact? What do you feel is the greatest impact in her loss?
Well, the first thing, you know, many of us, myself included, lost a good friend. And Stephanie's style, leadership style, was one that was very inclusive and was not a ham-fisted style. I mean, she welcomed discussion. She had no problem with disagreement. And those of us enjoyed working under her leadership because of those kind of skills. Obviously, she was building up power and influence in Congress, seated on the Ways and Means Committee, close to the Speaker of the House. And so we've suffered a disadvantage locally because of that. Especially now with the Democratic majority, it would have been, she probably would have been a committee chair somewhere, still on Ways and Means, and therefore could have done more for our area and more for the 11th Congressional District. And I think Marcia Fudge, with whom I graduated from high school, I've known her for more years than she and I would acknowledge publicly, because that would tell everybody our age. She's going to do a fine job, but she doesn't have the seniority, and she's still becoming acclimated to D.C. and to Congress. Now, she's very bright, and she'll make the adjustment. There's no, in the transition, no question about that. But it's a difference between having somebody who's a freshman and somebody who would have had what, I think she would have been in her 6th term and on influential committees and that. So this community as a whole will suffer as a consequence of her loss, and it'll take us a while to regain, if ever. I mean, it's the same thing, the same kind of fall off you had when Congressman Stokes left on the Appropriations Committee, one of the almost cardinals, you know, in the top 4 or 5 members of the Appropriations Committee, and all that he could do for Northeast Ohio in that role. So you lost that seniority and that influence when he retired, and now we're kind of back to square one in Cuyahoga County.
When she passed, it left a vacancy in her spot at a very bad time politically. You had fall elections coming up, and you had filing deadlines coming up.
Filing deadlines had largely passed.
For the most, but in your race, you were one of the names who was floated out there as an obvious choice to possibly succeed her, and you found yourself in a position, at least it had been reported, that you were kind of in a bind because you were on the ballot for county commission. If you decided to run for Congress, you wouldn't be able to also run for the commission, correct?
That would have been correct.
And the Democrats would not have been able to fill that
to replace
spot?
me. That's right. We would have had to run a write-in candidate. You know,
how difficult was that for you, and how much consideration did you give the House race?
Well, I gave it due consideration. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity, however, kind of ill-begotten, and unfortunately, in the way that it arose. But I never lost any sleep over the decision I made, so I know I made the right one. There were several considerations. First, it was bad timing because I still have 2 children at home. My oldest is in college, but I still have a daughter in high school, as I mentioned earlier, and a little guy in elementary school. And I wasn't crazy about the notion of traveling back and forth to D.C. and still having 2 children at home. It's different if there have only been one. Then I guess one moves to D.C., you maintain a residency here, but you can be together as a family unit. And your older kids are off at college and in grad school, so they aren't around anyway. So that was probably the #1 consideration. Close behind was the fact that we essentially would have been giving my opponent, a Republican, the seat, because we would have had to run a write-in candidacy, and it would have been very difficult to get people to write in somebody's name 250,000 times, which would have been required in order to defeat that Republican candidate, who was extremely well funded. Matter of fact, she outspent me probably better than 3-2. So I kind of took one for the party in that respect as well, to maintain that seat in Democratic hands. And why that's so important is that Republicans who hold countywide office in Cuyahoga County tend to go on to win statewide office. George Voinovich,
right.
Jim Petro, And so you don't want to give Republicans a toehold here in Cuyahoga County, because if they can get a good vote out of Cuyahoga County, they become almost impossible to defeat. The third thing was this. There was that opportunity, ironically enough, came right after the FBI raid. So there was kind of a vacuum when it came to leadership at the county level. And so it wouldn't have been a good time for me to leave also, given the challenges that the county was confronting then with Medical Mart, Convention Center, balancing the budget, and county government reform. There were so many issues, and that we needed a little bit of stability on the county-wide level, and I felt that my influence was more needed at the county, certainly during that pivotal period of time, than would have been in Congress.